My name is Chris Collier. I'm the Executive Director of Renew Theaters, which runs the Ambler Theater, County Theater, Highway Theater, and Princeton Garden Theater. And we are really, really excited to be presenting another Deep Focus event. And this one of our first ones directly in partnership with our Deep Focus partner, the Gettysburg Theater. We are thrilled to have been able to expand this program thanks to a generous grant from the Vesta Fund. And part of that program is to expand this program to bring other theaters in the tri-state area and to spread educational programs throughout the region so that more people can enjoy film and come together to talk about them. As part of that, the generous gift from the Vesta Fund also allows us to make this program free for our members. So I want to say a special thank you to all of the members of our 4 theaters, and also a welcome to any of the members of the Gettysburg Theater who are joining us. As a member, you not only get free access to all of these live discussions, but to the whole catalog, the whole back catalog of all the previous discussions. So if you actually go to deepfocus.film/member, you'll actually see a link, and you probably did this to sign up and get this link. But as soon as you create your member credential in Eventive, it actually unlocks all of the films that are on there, or all the discussions that are on there. So all of the upcoming events and all of the past films, you can just click and start watching them. This is part of our Hollywood Classics series, and we also have 3 additional programs that are running this fall. One is on Middle Eastern cinema and will be moderated by an Iranian filmmaker who is currently studying at Temple. We also have a series of Asian American films led by Ann Cheng at Princeton University, and getting ready for the new Wes Anderson film, The French Dispatch. We have a series called Wes on Wednesdays, which will be kicking off next week, or actually tomorrow night, with a discussion on Wes Anderson's film, The Royal Tenenbaums. You can find all of the information about the films and the speakers at deepfocus.film. And as soon as I'm done speaking, I'll throw that into the chat so that you can all find it. A handful of these films we are making available for a big screen screening experience. As I did mention earlier, we did have Greatest Show on Earth at 3 of our locations this past week so that you can see it. If anyone is in the Ambler, Princeton, or Doylestown area, we do have a screening of A Separation, the acclaimed Iranian film, this Sunday afternoon. And Hannah Jack's next title in the classic film series is going to be the 1974 The Taking of Pelham 123, as a bit of a thriller for October. So we have a screening of that actually this upcoming week as well. And I'm sure the Majestic has a ton of incredible classics and things on their screens. So make sure to check their website as well for what films they may have. Quickly, Zoom protocols. As a reminder, we ask everyone to remain on mute unless you are speaking. I think since it's a small group, we will start with using the raise hand feature, and I can call on you, but I think since this is an intimate discussion, I think we can actually just jump right into asking questions, and we're not going to have to play with the mute and raise hand feature. We'll see how that goes. I guess the only other item of note is it's now my pleasure to introduce Jeffrey Gabel. He has served as the Gettysburg College founding executive director of the Majestic since 2003, and oversaw the theater's $16.5 million renovation, which restored the 1925 vaudeville and silent movie theater. Those of you who are in the Philadelphia area, I highly recommend taking a trip out to Gettysburg and checking out the theater. It is a gem, and definitely worth the visit. And Jeffrey has done a wonderful job overseeing the renaissance of that theater. In addition to his work at the theater, he also serves as the vice chair of the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts and is a board member emeritus of the League of Historic American Theaters. He also holds a degree in music performance, which I actually just learned from reading your bio, Jeffrey. And the funny thing is, so do I. So I guess that's where all musicians end up, is managing movie theaters. But the real reason that Jeffrey has picked this film and what qualifies him to discuss it is he actually began his show business career in 1971 as a clown with Circus Kirk, which is a student circus, and then went on to tour across America for 6 years with its largest tented circuses. As Chuckles the Clown, he appeared as a special guest in the national television series Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And after he retired from the circus, he enjoyed a 15-year career in public television as a host, producer, writer, fundraiser, and station manager, and while there, helped to develop shows you may all know, like Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, The Magic School Bus, and Barney the Dinosaur. So we are absolutely thrilled to have Jeffrey Gabel here to talk to us about this film and enlighten us about the circus. So Jeffrey, I turn it over to you.
Well, it's a great pleasure and privilege to be with all of you and share my joy of circus days. And from its earliest days, Hollywood has been fascinated by the circus. Charlie Chaplin and Lon Chaney both made silent films with circus plots. Of course, the Marx Brothers' Day at the Circus, Disney's Dumbo in 1941, and more recently, the evocative film adaptation of the bestseller Water for Elephants in 2011, and the charismatic Hugh Jackman as the Greatest Showman in 2017. The circus even drove the steely Joan Crawford berserk in 1967. But ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, I'm pleased to present tonight the most spectacular circus film of all time. The greatest show on earth. It won the Academy Award for Best Picture in 1952. Time magazine called it a mammoth merger of two masters of malarkey for the masses, P.T. Barnum and Cecil B. DeMille. Other critics said it was the worst movie ever to win Best Picture. Although its storyline is a bit hokey, it surely deserved its Academy Award, if only for the fact that it captured for time immemorial, in glorious big screen Technicolor, the dying breath of the biggest and grandest tented circus ever to grace America's mud show trail, Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey's Circus. Watching this film, you can easily imagine why every small town kid in America dreamed of running away with the circus. I know because I was one of them. At the age of 20, I quit college and ran away. As he mentioned, Circus Kirk, a small tented circus, all operated by high school and college students, and went on to spend the next 4 years performing as Chuckles the Clown, touring with the second largest tented circus in America, east of the Mississippi, Hoxie Brothers Circus, where a typical season was 300 consecutive one-night stands from early spring to late fall. That's crawled trooping. Here is Chuckles with Fred Rogers. We're on the lot of the Clyde Beatty Cole Brothers Circus in 1986, where we were taping a segment, Mr. Rogers Goes to the Circus, for his PBS television series. And behind me, if we go back to the live shot, you can see Chuckles, one of Chuckles' big pink shoes just over my shoulder. They each weigh about 15 pounds apiece. So, America's love affair with tented circuses is almost as old as our democracy itself. Circuses outlasted the minstrel show, the Wild West show, and even vaudeville. And between the Civil War and World War II, America was transforming itself from coast to coast into a modern, industrialized, multi-ethnic society, and the traveling circus was a celebration of America's burgeoning diversity, representing a human menagerie of ethnic and racial profiles, gender bending role reversals, and bodily anomalies. The Circus Day was the biggest day of the year, especially in small rural towns. For months in advance, giant, garishly colored posters plastered all over town announced the circus was coming. On Circus Day, the whole town gathered before dawn to await the arrival of the circus and watch the free spectacle of a city of tents arising out of a vacant lot. Factories shut down, schools closed, and shops were shuttered. Farmers traveled long distances on horse and wagon to rubberneck at the exotic animals and spend precious pennies on such luxuries as cotton candy and pink lemonade. At the peak in 1903, 98 circuses were crisscrossing America. But sadly today, only a handful of small family shows remain on the road under the big top. The heyday of circuses came to a close shortly, heyday of tented circuses, I should say, came to a close shortly after World War II as a result of several factors, including the disastrous Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey circus fire in Hartford, Connecticut in 1944, where 168 people were burned or trampled to death, including 80 children. Another 487 people were injured. Ringling gave its final performance under canvas in Pittsburgh on July 16, 1956, just 5 years after DeMille's film captured the real life behind the scenes human drama of the massive logistics of the Ringling Show, which included 1,200 roustabouts, hundreds of animals, 60 railroad cars loaded with tons of equipment, and some 85 circus acts, including these legendary performers and personalities who appear in DeMille's movie. You're right on the ball, Chris. You're doing a great job. First, upper left of our screen is John Ringling North, who was the nephew of the 7 founding Ringling brothers from Baraboo, Wisconsin. North studied business at the University of Wisconsin and Yale. He took over the family business after the last Ringling brother passed away. North managed the show's transition from the big top to air-conditioned arenas, in part to reduce the labor costs of putting up the big top. North was a showman in his own right, who once hired ballet impresario George Balanchine to choreograph a ballet featuring the circus's elephants, all dancing to a polka written by Russian composer Igor Stravinsky. Now that's showmanship. On the big ball with the star painted on it is the beautiful and talented Antoinette Concello, known as the greatest woman trapeze artist of all time, and the first to perform the dangerous triple somersault. She was part of the Flying Concellos who toured with Ringling for years, and in the film, they appear in all the wide shots of the trapeze act. Next, we have tramp clown Emmett Kelly, who created the lovable character Weary Willie based on the hobos of the Great Depression. Kelly's raggedy costume and sad sack shuffling were the perfect foil for the madcap cavorting of the brightly colored white-faced clowns. Down in the lower left of our screen is band leader Merle Evans, who, listen to this, played over 22,000 performances in his 50-year career with Ringling. Playing the cornet with his right hand and conducting with his left, Evans was known as the Toscanini of the Big Top. He was credited with saving thousands of lives at the Hartford fire because he spotted the fire from the bandstand and immediately struck up the Star-Spangled Banner, which was the circus's emergency alarm that signaled all hands to the Big Top to evacuate the crowd. I had the good fortune to see one of Merle Evans' last public appearances with the U.S. Army Band in Washington, D.C. in the mid-1980s. And then in the circus poster in the middle bottom is the greatest producing clown of them all, Lou Jacobs, who toured with Ringling for 60 years. That's Lou behind me in the poster, but you can see better in the close-up. His most famous gag was featured in the movie, where he drives into the ring in a miniature bright yellow 2-foot by 3-foot car with Jimmy Stewart watching him. Jacobs wiggles 1 foot out first, and then all 6 feet 1 inch of him pop out at once to the delight of the crowd. His miniature clown card has inspired hundreds of cartoons in the New Yorker magazine. Jacob's clown face appeared on tens of thousands of circus posters and print ads, all without his permission or remuneration. Can you imagine? He was also the first living person to have his portrait appear on a United States postage stamp. I was so fortunate and thrilled to see Jacobs with Ringling in the mid-1970s, where he buzzed around the Hershey Arena in a motorized bathtub, taking a real bubble bath. And finally, a tremendous Ringling trooper that I had the good fortune to work with on Hoxsey Brothers some 20 years after she appeared in the movie, and that is Myrtle the elephant. Myrtle appears early in the film where she's getting a scrub brush bath. On Hoxsey, Myrtle always brought down the house in the center ring with her famous hula dance. If you're interested, I can tell you a sweet story about Myrtle during our conversation afterwards. Now, when DeMille was casting The Greatest Show on Earth, Paramount was at its zenith. So DeMille had an incredible stable of stars to choose from, including Audrey Hepburn, Danny Kaye, Gregory Peck, William Holden, Burt Lancaster, Barbara Stanwyck, Henry Fonda, and Alan Ladd, just to name a few. DeMille was adamant about one thing: the stars he cast would have to do their own stunts in the close-ups. And here are the stars that appear in the show. Of course, in the upper left, Betty Hutton as Holly, the vivacious and ambitious aerialist and trapeze artist who dreams of center ring while making eyes at the boss canvas man. Hutton was born to play the role with her vivacious energy and athleticism. She was reared in poverty in Battle Creek, Michigan, and started out as a band singer and then signed with Paramount at the incredible age of just 21. Her biggest role was in Irving Berlin's musical, Annie Get Your Gun, where she replaced an ailing Julie Garland after the filming had already begun. Hutton retired at the age of 39 and lived a quiet life of charitable service in near obscurity. Next, the casting of Brad, the circus big top boss, couldn't have been easy for DeMille because he needed a strong actor who could keep the circus running on time even while bleeding to death pinned beneath a locomotive. The role was tailor-made for Charlton Heston, whose prominent jaw looks as though it was chiseled out of Mount Rushmore. Heston was an aerial gunner in the U.S. Army Air Force during World War II, stationed in the remote Aleutian Islands off of Alaska. He had only made his movie debut 2 years earlier in a dreadful version of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. DeMille spotted the 6'2" Heston strutting across the Paramount lot and thought he looked perfect for the role. Heston was so believable in the role of Brad, even with the hokey dialogue, that DeMille cast him as Moses in the Ten Commandments, which made Heston a superstar. In the upper right-hand corner, we have the great Sebastian, the daring young man on the fine trapeze, played by Cornell Wilde, one of the prettiest men in Hollywood who wore his tights with pride. Wilde was a natural athlete and champion fencer. DeMille originally considered Burt Lancaster for the role because he had been a real circus acrobat. It was only after DeMille cast Wilde that he revealed that he was scared of heights. To his credit, Wilde trained hard and did all his trapeze close-ups himself. Then in the lower left-hand corner, we have Dorothy Lamour, who plays Phyllis, the iron jaw aerialist, which is a real act in the circus. In the film's trailer, DeMille described Phyllis as everyone's best friend who you should never share secrets with. Oh, Lamour was famous for wearing tight clinging sarongs in the popular series of road pictures with Bing Crosby and Bob Hope. DeMille shows his sense of humor by having Lamour sing the lovely Luana Lady in the big Hawaiian musical number in Center Ring while cutting the camera to uncredited Bing and Bob watching from the bleachers. And finally, Pennsylvania's own Jimmy Stewart plays Buttons the Clown, who never takes off his makeup because he's on the lam from the law. Stewart was born in the small town of Indiana and attended the elite Mercersburg Academy just west of Gettysburg, where he played football, the accordion, and appeared in plays. He went on to Princeton University, where he toured with the Princeton Players, and upon graduation, he moved to New York City to pursue an acting career where he roomed with another starving actor, Henry Fonda. If you've never visited the charming Jimmy Stewart Museum in his hometown of Indiana, just east of Pittsburgh, I highly recommend it because it's filled with wonderful memorabilia from his long and distinguished Hollywood career. And finally, there is also an uncredited appearance in the circus parade by cowboy matinee idol William Boyd, AKA Hopalong Cassidy, on his white horse Topper. Boyd's appearance in the film was his way of saying thank you to DeMille, who had discovered him in the early 1920s. And of course, there's DeMille on the lower right-hand side. We're going to talk about him in a moment. The greatest show on earth took 83 shooting days on location and in the studio, which doesn't seem like a whole lot of days to me. It opened in May 1952 at Radio City Music Hall and went on to become the highest grossing film of 1952, costing only $4 million, but earning $36 million at the box office in the United States. At the 25th Annual Awards, it won Oscars for Best Picture and Original story. While the Best Director Oscar went to John Ford that year for The Quiet Man, DeMille received the Irving G. Thalberg Lifetime Achievement Award for creative producers whose body of work reflects a consistently high quality of motion picture production. Cecil Blount DeMille was a Moses-like figure in the history of Hollywood because he was one of the original founders of the motion picture industry. His career was as epic as his movies. He was a playwright, actor, director, aviator, million-dollar entrepreneur, radio broadcaster, and the most commercially successful producer-director of his time, with 70 films to his credit, all but 7 made money at the box office. He was particularly known for his religious epics, including The King of Kings, Samson and Delilah, and the 10 Commandments, where he blended spectacle, sex, and edge of your seat storytelling with faith and redemption. Behind me, if we could cut to the live picture again, Chris, is the poster of another one of his famous or not so well-known religious epics, The Road to Yesteryear, which opened the Gettysburg Majestic Theater on November 14th, 1925. DeMille created the image of the all-powerful movie director strutting around in jodhpurs, riding boots, yelling out orders through a megaphone. And he was a star maker who discovered Gloria Swanson, Claudette Colbert, Jean Arthur, and, I didn't know this, Robert Preston. DeMille was also the founder of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. DeMille was also a right-wing conservative Republican who, during the despicable MacArthur era, was a secret snitch for J. Edgar Hoover, which resulted in the blacklisting of alleged communists in the motion picture industry. Following his triumph with The Greatest Show on Earth, DeMille would remake his 1923 silent film, The 10 Commandments. While filming the Exodus scene on location in Egypt with some 14,000 extras and 15,000 animals, DeMille suffered a heart attack after climbing 130 feet up a ladder to check a faulty camera perched up on one of the giant city gates. He took 2 days off and returned and finished work on the film against his doctor's orders. He completed the film, but he never directed again and died in 1959 at age of 77. When director Steven Spielberg accepted the Cecil B. DeMille Award at the 66th Annual Golden Globes, he expressed his gratitude to DeMille for helping him come to love filmmaking in the first place, describing his earliest childhood memory of going to see The Greatest Show on Earth at age 6 with his father. Spielberg remarked, "I think my fate was probably sealed on that day in 1952. So I'll close my presentation with the Midway Barker's last lines in the movie, spoken off screen by Edmund O'Brien. "That's all, ladies and gentlemen, that's all. Come again, bring your children, bring the old folks. You can shake the sawdust off your feet, but you can't shake it out of your heart. Come again to the greatest show on earth." Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. John, I saw you raise your hand. in the middle there. Did you have a question?
A couple of things, not questions. Number one, the Oh Hell song, to keep it kind of family style, for the circus bands was Stars and Stripes Forever, not the national anthem. You didn't want people standing still when you played that song. And that's what Merle and the band played up at Hartford. I would add to your description of John Ringling North that he was a man of great talent and great breadth of talent. He took over the show in the 30s, ran it for several years, is credited with modernizing the performance, even then bringing in showgirls, which was one of his specialties. But the family politics of the Ringling family got in the way, and he got kicked out, and they brought in a schmuck from Coney Island to run the circus for a couple of years. That didn't work well. So anyway, John got a little bit perturbed. So the war came, and he took a naval commission, went off and joined the Office of Strategic Services, which you may know is predecessor of the Central Intelligence Agency. He did enough in North Africa and Italy to get himself some sort of a medal, but after the Hartford fire, he came back, took the financial reins of the circus, negotiated deals with the population of Hartford, with the city fathers, and through the court system to get the 4 members of the circus crew who were in jail, get them a little bit reduced sentences, got them out of jail. Then he proceeds to rebuild this circus that had suffered, as you said, Jeffrey, a tremendous loss of face and of reputation with the fire. North rebuilt the show. They toured for several months without canvas. Some of the greatest photographs available of the Ringling Show were taken that summer because you weren't in the obscured area of the Big Top, and you could use the very slow color film of the period. Anyhow, he got the deal with DeMille. The circus did really well up until that disastrous day in Pittsburgh, and of course the rest carries on. But John Ringling North clearly kept the show going, brought it back into the arenas. And the one time I saw the big show was, like you, Jeffrey, in the Hershey Arena, and had a very interesting encounter with the Tigers outside the arena, which I'll save for another occasion.
Was that with Gunther Gabel Williams Tigers?
No, that was well before. In fact, it was the Felds, the people who took over from Johnny North, who hired Gunther. That's another one of those wonderful stories. Gunther was a wartime waif. His mother was a seamstress. After World War II, she sought work in Circus Williams. Turns out she was a good seamstress and also an attractive woman. She married the owner of Circus Williams. Gunther became his heir and was running this circus when the Felds came over to try and recruit him for ringlets. And he said, "No, I'm not going to come." And the Felds said, what if we buy the whole show? So they did. They bought Circus Williams, brought it over, outfitted it as a second Ringling unit, thus the birth of the Blue Show. The old circus was the Red Show, and the Williams crew was the Blue Show, and it was a combination that worked very well for the Felds and for the circus performer.
Thank you for that incredible backstory, John. I think between your insight and the documentary footage in the film, I think a lot of us have gained a new appreciation of the circus. Anne, I saw your hand up.
I was just applauding at the end of the presentation. But I did have one interesting thing that I happened to read about, about the movie, that there was another cameo of a little boy named Merrill Reese, who is the announcer for the Philadelphia Eagles. Because
that I didn't know.
Yeah, and because part of it was filmed down where the stadiums are. That was, I guess, some open land there to set up the tent, and so he was just one of the kids that went to the show and got to be in the movie.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, well, we have to go back and watch it and see if we can find him now. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
Didn't your cat like our discussion?
The wrong kind of cat.
My cat is not a circus cat.
Yeah.
She prefers film to, serious film to circus film.
A discerning cat, of course. One of the things I thought I might mention, in Betty Hutton's first appearance as an aerialist, she is doing, did you see her spin in the long shot, spin her whole body around in what it is actually called a one-arm Luke flange, which was not a word I was familiar with. We always just called it the propeller. But I don't know who actually performed it in the real shots. Of course, Betty was only in the close-ups, but that was all in honor to Lillian Leitzel, who was the queen of the air and who performed with Ringling in the 1920s. And she would do those propeller spins, and with each spin, the audience would count along 1, 2, 3, and there'd be this big cymbal crash on each new turn. And her record, her all-time record, you're not going to believe this, 249 consecutive propeller turns. Unfortunately, she fell to her death performing the act in 1931 at the age of 40.
Wow. Jeffrey, I don't know if you know how they filmed a lot of those scenes, but I was surprised by how much each of the actors were doing. Can you speak at all to how they did set up some of those trapeze scenes? Or
from what I read, they shot the interiors in the actual tent, both at the winter quarters in Sarasota and I think was when they were on location in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. And it looked like the real thing to me. That's exactly what the circus looks like under a big top. They obviously brought in lots of lighting, but I didn't read anything about how they did the camera work or anything. Of course, they did a lot of the close-ups and everything back in Studio 16 in the Paramount lot. But those were, I recognize many of the clowns, of course, more than just the two that I mentioned, and other circus performers as well. They were just, if you were in the circus, you likely appeared somewhere during the filming. So I don't know any more than that about how they actually shot it.
Yeah, sorry to put you on the spot. It just,
Oh, no, that's
I
okay.
was surprised at how seamlessly some of the actors seem to mix into the company of the real circus performers.
One of the things about the show, DeMille invested a great deal of money in relighting the Ringling Big Top,
It would have to.
and they had far better lighting than you would have seen the year before. And also DeMille completely recostumed the show. And I believe they lived off of those costumes for the next couple of years as well.
The tenant circuses I toured with had terrible lighting, terrible lighting.
Well, you're carting your generator around with you, and you can't
Exactly.
cart an unlimited supply of power. Plus, all of those lights have to be hoisted up into the top every
Chandeliers,
time
yeah.
you set the blasted thing up.
You mentioned the generator. In addition to the fresh aroma of wild animals, particularly elephants, when you're on a circus lot, the constant roar of the generator is also, you just lived with it, because that's the first thing. As soon as it got to the lot in the day, in the morning, they would turn that on. And as the performers arrived with their tractors and their own trailers and everything, and that was the last thing to turn the generator off after the show, after everything was packed up, because they still needed the lights. That was the last thing that was turned off, and then hit the road.
When they got to a city, how many shows would they do? And that it jumped around a lot in the film, so I didn't get a sense of how long they were in any given place.
I think, John, you may know better than I, but Ringling probably, when they were still under tent, they were probably doing, certainly in cities, they may have spent a whole week in the city, just like they did in arenas. But when they were out in the smaller rural areas, if they played there, they were doing just like the kind of trooping I did. We moved every day. Every day was you were traveling 50 to 120 miles to the next town, following the cardboard arrows that someone had tacked up on telephone poles the night before, because many of the truck drivers didn't have, this is back in the early 70s, many of the truck drivers didn't have licenses. And maybe they didn't read, but they didn't have maps, so they just followed these cardboard arrows that each circus had their own particular design.
That's amazing.
Yeah, the Ringlings traditionally would open in Madison Square Garden. That would be about a month stand. And then they'd move to the Boston Garden and then hit the rails for a whole bunch of, as Jeffrey was saying, that the overnight gig, or not overnight, the one-day gigs where they'd pull into town at 6 a.m. and you would see what I always considered the greatest show on earth, the movement of all that equipment from the railhead to the circus grounds, no matter what the weather. There are some wonderful pictures from the 40s of the Ringling Show setting up in Du Bois, Pennsylvania. Any of you ever been to Du Bois? That's
I
about,
think I died there.
about 40 miles north of Indiana,
That's right.
up there in God's country. And it had rained a couple of days before this performance. And there are pictures of their Caterpillar tractors dragging the seat wagons through this sea of mud. But they would get the show set up, put on a matinee at 2, and the main show at 7, shows over at 9, pack up and load the train before or maybe a little after midnight, and off they go to the next stand.
When you, the rare times when you were stuck on a really, really muddy lot, often the elephants were brought out and they would help tow the trucks and trailers out of the mud because they could go anywhere. And one of the memories I have is on a dark and rainy night, Lord knows where we were, and I had to be, my truck and trailer had to be pulled off. So being the circus clown, I was the last one to get pulled off the lot. Everything, all the other equipment, the performers were the last and the clowns were the very last. But sitting in the cab of my truck with this huge elephant rear end backing up to my truck and then pulling me off with my, so I was illuminating the elephant's rear end with my headlights. It was quite a picture. They're wonderful creatures, the most remarkable creatures. I mentioned Myrtle the elephant. You know, the elephants were the hardest working members of the circus crew because they helped pull some of the trucks around. They helped haul up the tent on the big rings, on the bailing rings on each of the tent poles. And then they'd give them, after everything was set up and the sideshow tent was set up, they'd give the elephants a bath and then they'd put them all into the sideshow so they could charge people to buy peanuts to go to buy a ticket to go into the sideshow to see the elephants and feed them with peanuts that they would buy. And Myrtle was so gentle, and she had a handler on Hoxie that had been with her for decades, a real character. And I would go in and see this practically every day. Before the matinee, he would go in and lie down in the fresh straw between the elephants right next to Myrtle, and he'd take a nap. And as he was napping, Myrtle would go down with her trunk and pull up some hay and put over this guy. And she'd keep doing it until she totally covered him up and never stepped on him. He had just amazing creatures, amazing.
These are wonderful stories. Anyone else? Any other? I'd love to hear. Okay, so just a show of hands, who had a chance to see this at the theater on the big screen? Anyone? Was anyone seeing this for the first time? For those who were seeing it for the first time, was there anything that jumped out to you, or was especially telling as you saw the film? I'd just be curious to hear.
Yeah, Chris, it really highlighted to me how difficult that way of life was for people. It just seemed like what it took to put it on, was just such a tremendous effort, and to break it down, it seemed like they were moving daily. to me. You know, that just really stayed with me. And I'd never seen the big, you know, that particular circus, but I'd gone to Clyde Beatty numerous times as it came through like the towns that I lived in and stuff, and even took my kids to it when it was still around and enjoyed it very much. Yeah.
Elise?
Beatty's another one that Jeff, you should add to your list of circus movies. The Big Cage was his entry into the movie making world, and he could always be depended upon to produce some pretty dramatic scenes with some of his cats, particularly, I've forgotten the name of the lion that he worked with, but this cat was so old, it was about like Elise's cat in terms of the way it would behave with Beatty.
Oh boy, that's funny.
Elise, I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, I think this movie cleared up a childhood trauma for me or something.
Wow.
All my life, for some irrational reason, I've always avoided this movie, didn't want to see it. It kind of made, the idea of it kind of made me shudder. And as I started watching it, I realized that I had seen it as a very small, I must have been a very small child. And I remembered now, watching it again yesterday, being absolutely terrified and running out of the room when the train crashed. And I guess I forgot everything about it, other than the, you know, the residual fear I had when I was, you know, 8 years old or whatever. But I'm glad I saw it last night. It was better than a trip to the therapist. So thank you for that. And just one other thing. Did you, Jeffrey, did you say that it won the award for Best Original Story?
That's what I read.
That amazes me because, well, I thought it was a terrific document of the circus. I really enjoyed that. I thought, you know, everything else just was a non-starter. You know, the romance, really? I love you, I don't love you, I love you, I have to have you, I hate you, I love you, let's get married. You know, that's my synopsis. So I'm really surprised that it would win for the best story. Anyway, that's my comment.
Well, I use, in the circus course that I teach, I use both The Greatest Show on Earth and Water for Elephants. And Water for Elephants is just, first of all, Sarah Gruen's book is marvelous, a tremendous piece of research. And the film has actors in it. I'm sorry, Charlton Heston can play God and no one else. And Betty Hutton, I'm not ever sure that she acted. I refer to The Greatest Show on Earth as a documentary with bad acting.
Well, we will
And it was
update
actually,
we will update the
actually the
description on the
third
Deep
time-
Focus website to just say, watch this exciting documentary with bad acting. So Jeffrey, sorry, I cut you off.
this was the third train wreck that DeMille ever shot. The first one was in The Road to Yesteryear in 1925, and then again in Union Pacific with Robert Preston. And then this was the best train wreck of all time because he finally figured out how to do it. They built train cars that were 6 feet in length and designed to crumble realistically in the train wreck. And all of that was shot, you could tell it was shot in a studio, but very artfully done. And then the scenes where after the train wrecks and the animals are loose everywhere, some of the notes that I read said that that was actually the case, and that a whole group of monkeys escaped the sound stage And there was a cemetery or something, Heavenly Gate Cemetery or something next door where they all gathered. So, wow, the train wreck is spectacular.
And I believe several of the cars, the rail cars from the train wreck are still with us. And if I recall correctly, were just donated to Circus World out at Baraboo, Wisconsin. So if you're out that way, drop in and say hello.
That's another wonderful place to visit. The Circus Museum there, the home of the Ringling Brothers, is just wonderful. And the Ringling, there's a Ringling Historic Theater there. Very small theater, but lavishly done. It's a beautiful place to visit in the summertime.
I
It
see that
is
we are-
Wisconsin after all.
I see that we are just coming up on about an hour, which is about how long we tend to do this. I know you have closing statements, Jeffrey. I just wanted to see if anyone else had any other thoughts or comments they would like to share with everyone about the film. Jeffrey, or Jeff, yeah.
I guess it's nothing novel or it's probably known to everyone, but I found it interesting. I took my kids to see Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey on their final 2017 outing. And after, I thought it was fantastic. I'd seen it as a kid at least twice that I remember, probably at like 6 or 7 the first time and 12 or 13 the second time. My kids were 8 or 9 when we went, but it was funny that I had read afterwards that they point to the demise of the modern circus to the elephants, that once the elephants were removed from the show, which they are wonderful and they're fantastic and they're strange creatures. I was amazed that despite all the other efforts of trapeze or people on, a cage with motorcycles and, all these spectacular events, that the circus still didn't, couldn't remain viable and attract audiences at that point. I don't know. I thought that was just very interesting. And, I'm sure PETA had their say, in everything that went down with that. But the show I saw still had big cats. I mean, they still had animals and things, but it was the silver bullet of the elephants that seemed to be the success or failure of the modern circus.
Any other comments? Jeffrey, I know that you had a closing statement that you
Thank you.
wanted to make to send us out.
Thank you, Chris, for inviting me to relive my youth on the Mud Show Trail, the Sawdust Trail. I really enjoyed doing this and meeting up with all of you and hearing your stories. And on the circus, it's bad luck to say goodbye. So with the traditional words of farewell on the circus, I say, here's wishing you blue skies, short halls, grassy lots, and straw houses, and I'll see you down the road.
Thank you, everyone. It was a real pleasure meeting with you to discuss this film. Thank you, Jeffrey, so much for showing us behind the scenes on the circus. And we'll hope to see many of you at our other discussions. Please check out, I'll throw it in the chat right now, our website for more. And thank you again for joining us tonight.